I am always suspicious when I only hear one side of any story. Our climate has changed throughout history, and all evidence suggests it's happening again now. And finally, the loudest voices in the world have begun to offer more than just carbon emissions as an excuse for the shift. It's something I've suggested for a while, and what follows is a review of the facts without the sensationalism behind which they are too often veiled. Make no mistake, carbon dioxide, both man-made and natural, does play a role. Along with methane and water vapor, the greenhouse gas correlation to temperature has been remarkable for hundreds of thousands of years. CO2, temperature, methane in blue, red, and green. We have recently seen an even more extreme increase in CO2, nearing 400 parts per million in the atmosphere, and on those longer time scales it looks like this. And with the last few years' temperature changing only slightly, we can say that the CO2 curve has officially deviated from the correlated temperature. Our longer-term data, over hundreds of millions of years, is less certain, based on more guesses and different analysis. But our best guesses show that those greenhouse gas correlations have not held true over millions of years, and that right now, Earth has not yet hit the historic high temperature mark. Those pushing for a lone carbon causation like to show that the sun's energy is flatter over the same time period, and this is where the alternative hypothesis begins. First, the sun's energy absolutely does ebb and flow and has generally increased over the last 70 years, even if only slightly. NASA recently joined this discussion, forcefully asserting that slight solar variability can have drastic changes on the climate. Scientists are observing that this is one of the most influential climate-forcing factors. Daily viewers in our community were set alight as they had heard this before. It's certainly not a new notion, but we are now gaining more of an understanding of how the sun and cosmic rays affect our climate, and we're learning the true power of energy from outer space. One aspect of this currently under dispute, as the mechanism for cosmic ray cloud formation is well understood, recent data present contradictory observations. This, of course, does not change the fact that they ionize the atmosphere and electrochemically destroy the ozone when oxygen and nitrogen square off. Keeping in mind the move towards space weather influence of the climate, the piece of the puzzle that gets almost no mention in the press is the one I consider most important. Earth's protective interface with energy from space, known as the magnetosphere. This is the visualization of it weakening over the last 400 years. Considering that this is well known in the scientific community, it's curious that we do not hear more about it, even as NASA finds it doing its Swiss cheese impression. Earth's magnetism changes in other ways as the pole shift you may have heard about has indeed begun. Over 73 years, the normal movement of the magnetic North Pole was slightly above average, but after that it began racing faster. 1904 to 1972 represents a shorter 68-year time period. Then, it took that same large jump in less than 30 years. Again, the scientific community is well aware that it doesn't stop, not in 2005 and not in late 2010. There are not regular reliable updates on this, and that needs to be fixed. The Discovery article I usually cite here has been removed. That's a double-edged sword considering they try to blame CO2 in the subtitle. But CNN picked up the story along with many other outlets, NASA confirming that they do not understand the recent drop in our atmosphere. The reason I like the Discovery article is because they are so close to the answer. They even say solar minimum shrinks the atmosphere. Well, the recent solar minimum started normally for a few years, but in 2007, the coronal holes began to leave their normal polar position and broke for lower latitudes. Then, the minimum known to shrink the atmosphere deepened to lower than it had in a long time, and it didn't stop, going even lower, and continued extra low levels beyond when the minimum was supposed to end. Solar maximum would normally expand the atmosphere, but the red line is expert predictions for the cycle, very low, and the actual sunspot numbers are clearly lower. Furthermore, the flaring from Earth-facing sunspots appears not to match the potential based on magnetic classification. It's more than just atmospheric collapse, it's over-ionization, too much energy taken in. This is 1 year of critical frequency readings of the F1 layer of the ionosphere near the end of the previous solar minimum that closed out the 1990s. This follows the solar cycle, so naturally it went up at the last maximum that kicked off the new millennium, came back down to start the solar minimum normally for a few years, but again, 2007 brought anomaly as the readings spiked despite the deep, prolonged minimum, and continued far off the charts. For more serious students of these topics, the combined collapse and over-energetic state of the ionosphere and atmosphere may play a role in the recent explosion of noctilucent cloud sightings across the globe. We already know the Sun is breaking stride. It's not just him and Earth. Venus' rotation is measurably slowing. The rates might seem trivial to us, but on a planetary scale it's actually quite significant. Modern Mars quakes. The moonquakes version of this article has gone missing as well, but there's evidence of recent huge seismic activity. Jupiter is the most changing of the planets, a new red spot as the prominent planet-wide stripe fades considerably. After 50 years of monitoring radio Jupiter, a new song emanates from Zeus, and a true electromagnetic event, the 2012 Jupiter flash, was blamed on asteroid impact, but there is no debris from an explosion and no cloud hole from an intact impactor. It's the concentric circles that give it away. The Saturn storm was only recently confirmed to be an anomaly. Saturn storms like this are regular occurrences every 30 years or so, but this was a decade early and has become the Energizer Bunny of Saturn storms. In 2004, they brushed off Saturn's slowing rotation as their error. Perhaps not. And for as long as Hubble has been out there, it was just recently able to see the auroras of Uranus. You can faintly see its little rings as well. You know, the Mayans never predicted a thing about doomsday, but the Baktun and their notion of a long solar cycle may have merit. As I said, the minimum was severe, the maximum is weak so far, and the sunspots are not flaring. NASA is also joining the growing number of us worried about the Earth facing quiet. They wonder if we're entering a significant minimum. The Sun's magnetic field is weakening as well, and if one Mayan Baktun is 394 years, the last one started with the Great Maunder Minimum. But that is also the time when our magnetic field began to fade. The poles have begun to shift, which certainly did not happen last time. There could be an outside force even further at work on a galactic level. The ENA ribbon is a magnetic signature on the heliosphere, the magnetic shield of the Sun surrounding the solar system. It turns the solar wind around, forcing it and ENAs into the inner system. This is Titan's atmosphere being bombarded with ENAs. The interstellar magnetic field is perfectly perpendicular to the ENA ribbon, suggesting a right-hand rule of electromagnetism forcing the ribbon. This could be everything or nothing. The answer to why this is happening, we just don't know. But the planet is changing. It's all extremes, not just warming. And it does appear to have begun long before humans had the chance to be its genesis or do more than simply speed up the process. Not that they aren't trying to have a say in the matter in every corner of the globe. Solar radiation management is the name given to their efforts to stop planetary warming. You've seen those days when the airplane trails don't disappear but grid and blanket the sky. The spraying of aerosols is supposed to be a last resort, not supposed to be in full operation over our heads. Patents even describe spraying out of airplanes. There are other aspects of weather modification involving wave propagation and air ionization, all types, high frequency, low frequency, on land, ships, planes, even satellites. More than I can name. Many believe you can see their signatures on radar and in the clouds. And when it comes to that radar equipment, there are those who believe their use of these frequencies is not just and more than what they're telling us, which would indeed be scary considering they're everywhere across the United States and the globe. I am not an expert on all these devices, but I will give you one piece of advice. HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, refers only to high-frequency conductivity modulation of the auroral electrojet near the poles. There are Tesla arrays, NexRads, and other devices that need no help from HAARP, spread all across the globe, and when you see this in Iowa, you have to ask, is this the result of electrical changes in the northern lights or the result of closer weather modification and chemtrails? I know this might seem scary, them trying to stop some magnificent shift here on Earth, and if they told us the truth, we'd probably panic, anarchy would ensue and ruin everything that they were trying to save. However, it's a terrible idea to play God. I have no faith that they understand the long-term effects of these technologies, and humans seem to have survived this in the past. They may be doing more harm than good. They may be lying about its implementation, and the aluminum oxide aerosols are toxic to plants and animals, including humans. You know, people like me never thought the mainstream media and NASA would push these topics in this way. How long until they tell us the rest of the story? Perhaps one might consider preparing one's family in case things don't magically go back to normal. The path forward is clear. Eyes open. No fear. Be safe, everyone.